to know that every tear proceeds from the heart, for there is no member of the body that will satisfy the heart so much as the eye. If the heart is in pain, the eye manifests it. And if the pain be sensual, the eye drops hearty tears which engender death, because proceeding from the heart, they are caused by a disordinate love, distinct from the love of me. For such love, being disordinate and an offense to me, receives the meed of mortal pain and tears. It is true that their guilt and grief are more or less heavy, according to the measure of their disordinate love. And these form that first class, who have the tears of death, of whom I have spoken to thee and will speak again. Now begin to consider the tears which give the commencement of life, the tears, that is, of those who, knowing their guilt, set to weeping for fear of the penalty they have incurred. These are both hearty and sensual tears, because the soul, not having yet arrived at perfect hatred of its guilt on account of the offense thereby done to me, abandons it with a hearty grief for the penalty which follows the sin committed, while the eye weeps in order to satisfy the grief of the heart. But the soul, exercising herself in virtue, begins to lose her fear, knowing that fear alone is not sufficient to give her eternal life, as I have already told thee when speaking of the second stage of the soul. And so she proceeds with love to know herself and my goodness in her, and begins to take hope in my mercy, in which her heart feels joy. Sorrow for her grief, mingled with the joy of her hope in my mercy, causes her eye to weep, which tears issue from the very fountain of her heart. But inasmuch as she has not yet arrived at great perfection, she often drops sensual tears, and if thou askest me why, I reply, because the root of self-love is not sensual love, for that has already been removed, as has been said, but it is a spiritual love with which the soul desires spiritual consolations, or loves some creature spiritually. I have spoken to thee at length regarding the imperfections of such souls. Wherefore, when such a soul is deprived of the thing she loves, that is, internal or external consolation, the internal being the consolation received from me, the external being that which she had from the creature, and when temptations and the persecutions of men come on her, her heart is full of grief. And as soon as the eye feels the grief and suffering of the heart, she begins to weep with a tender and compassionate sorrow, pitying herself with the spiritual compassion of self-love, for her self-will is not yet crushed and destroyed in everything, and in this way she lets fall sensual tears, tears, that is, of spiritual passion. But growing and exercising herself in the light of self-knowledge, she conceives displeasure at herself and finally perfect self-hatred. From this she draws true knowledge of my goodness with a fire of love, and she begins to unite herself to me, and to conform her will to mine, and so to feel joy and compassion. Joy in herself through the affection of love, and compassion for her neighbor, as I told thee in speaking of the third stage. Immediately her eye, wishing to satisfy the heart, cries with hearty love for me and for her neighbor, grieving solely for my offense and her neighbor's loss, and not for any penalty or loss due to herself, for she does not think of herself, but only of rendering glory and praise to my name, and in an ecstasy of desire she joyfully takes the food prepared for her on the table of the Holy Cross, thus conforming herself to the humble, patient, and immaculate Lamb, my only begotten Son, of whom I made a bridge, as I have said. Having thus sweetly traveled by that bridge, following the doctrine of my sweet truth, enduring with true and sweet patience every pain and trouble which I have permitted to be inflicted upon her for her salvation, having manfully received them all, not choosing them according to her own taste, but accepting them according to mine, and not only, as I said, enduring them with patience, but sustaining them with joy. She counts it glory to be persecuted for my name's sake in whatever she may have to suffer. Then the soul arrives at such delight and tranquility of mind that no tongue can tell it. Having crossed the river by means of the eternal word, that is, by the doctrine of my only begotten Son, and having fixed the eye of her intellect on me, the sweet supreme truth, having seen the truth, knows it, and knowing it, loves it. Drawing her affection after her intellect, she tastes my eternal deity, and she knows and sees the divine nature united to your humanity. Then she reposes in me, the sea Pacific, and her heart is united to me in love, as I have told thee when speaking of the fourth and unitive state. When she thus feels me, the eternal deity, her eyes let fall tears of sweetness, tears indeed of milk, nourishing the soul in true patience, an odoriferous ointment o'er these tears, shedding odors of great sweetness. O best beloved daughter, how glorious is that soul who has indeed been able to pass from the stormy ocean to me, the sea Pacific, and in that sea, which is myself, the supreme and eternal deity, to fill the pitcher of her heart. And her eye, the conduit of her heart, endeavors to satisfy her heart pangs, and so sheds tears. This is the last state in which the soul is blessed and sorrowful. Blessed she is through the union which she feels herself to have with me, tasting the divine love. Sorrowful through the offenses which she sees done to my goodness and greatness, for she has seen and tasted the bitterness of this in her self-knowledge, by which self-knowledge, together with her knowledge of me, she arrived at the final stage. Yet this sorrow is no impediment to the unitive state, which produces tears of great sweetness through self-knowledge, gained in love of the neighbor, in which exercise the soul discovers the plaint of my divine mercy, and grief at the offenses caused to her neighbor, weeping with those who weep, and rejoicing with those who rejoice. That is, live in my love. Over these the soul rejoices, seeing glory and praise rendered me by my servants, so that the third kind of grief does not prevent the fourth, that is, the final grief belonging to the unitive state. They rather give savor to each other. For had not this last grief, in which the soul finds such union with me, developed from the grief belonging to the third state of neighborly love, it would not be perfect. Therefore it is necessary that the one should flavor the other, else the soul would come to a state of presumption, induced by the subtle breeze of love of her own reputation, and would fall at once